Now it's time for us to take a look at doing a couple sort of finishing things here. We've gone through creating views, essentially crafting the model, creating some simple renderings and that sort of thing. And now it's time for us to essentially figure out how to just put it all together so that we eventually get something like these top two views. Now you will notice that for these oblique views, I didn't bother with any shadowing or anything like that, and that's just because since your oblique views are both such skewed views anyway, and are a lot more dimension focused than they are, figure and shadow and lighting focused. We're really only gonna look into doing this in the scope of your isometric views. So here's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna be talking about how to essentially create this in Illustrator, and it's not as hard as it looks. I can tell you that right now. It's a couple steps, but it's not going to be a problem. So let's begin. Let's start by, we'll go into one of our three-dimensional views here. So right now I think I'm in just parallel. So first off, if we want to create one of these, create an isometric view, as you may recall from some of the past things we've talked about, we're going to go up to View, left click, scroll down, and we're essentially going to go to Set View. We're going to scroll down to Isometric, and let's try Northeast. Let's see where that lands us. Okay, not bad. Maybe we can try another one. We can be a little picky here. Let's try Northwest. Okay, that's a little more interesting. That might make for a really interesting view. So here's what we're going to do. Now, this is going to be my big precursor prior to essentially doing this next part, because it is a little bit of a two-part process. All I'm going to suggest is that you make sure that you're keeping a nice consistent view. So if you set it to northwest or southwest for both of these steps that we're doing, you can scroll in. Scrolling in and out is no problem. But you don't want to mess around with it. Like, don't be doing any orbiting or anything like that, because you want to maintain this particular view. You can do something that I know I have glossed over in the past, and I'm sorry for it, and you can strafe if you want to. And to move left and right instead of just in and out, what you're going to do is you're going to hold Shift and your right key, or your right cursor, and that's going to let you move right to left. And now you're still looking at it from the same view. You're just able to strafe around a little bit and zoom in and out if you wish. So one more time, and again, I apologize for not talking about this one sooner. Strafing around your models, the left and right and up and down, instead of just in and out, is you hold Shift down, you hold the right cursor down, both held down. You can shift around as much as you like. Now let's get to figuring out how we're going to make these pieces. So here we go. We've got a view selected that we like. Now we're going to move over to the Ray Electron tool that we talked about earlier. And here's where this is going to be useful. We're going to, first off, we're going to go to our render panel. We're going to scroll down to panels. Again, render panels up here. Sorry if I did that too fast. We're going to go down to panels. Let's left click into sun here. Okay, when we go to lighting here, we see, okay, the sun will be turned on. Actually, we'll make sure the sun is turned on, rather. We're going to be turning on a manual control here as well. So again, sun on, manual control on. Good. Now it's time for us to use the Raytrace tool, this nice golden orb here. So we're going to zoom out a little bit just so we get a nice little bit of data of everything that's going on the site. And then we're going to hit, nope, we can X out of this for now if we like. Here, in fact, let's make this nice and big just so that we can really get the full scope of this little render we're going to spit out. So let's double click the parallel view. Great. We're still in parallel. Great. We're going to left click Raytrace. Whoa, it's going to get all crumbly for a second, but that's okay because it's going to be producing something with a little bit of shadow for us. And again, I know some of you may wrestle a little bit with the shadows and everything. If you're ever having a really hard time getting something sort of like this, do reach out to me on Zoom. We can certainly talk about, I guess playing around with your settings until we get something that we're happy with. But anyway, let's say that we're pretty happy with this, because you know we see some contours, we see some where the sun's coming from. For the scope of this phase of the project, that's pretty good. So now we're going to move over to this camera guy here, the camera tool, the capture viewport to file. Great. We're going to hit left click, generate in preview. Excellent. Resolution viewport looks good. Great. Now we're going to hit OK, and it's going to ask us where to save. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a folder for myself here. We're going to call this sample files for Illustrator. Great. We'll just keep everything safe in there. We're going to call this render isometric. Very good. Save. And in a second, let's go have a look and we'll make sure that's saved before we proceed. So when I go over here to my sample files for Illustrator, I apologize for how messy my background is. Double click. And sure enough, there we have it. So that's good. That's what we want. Now let's get back to Rhino. Now time for part two of this kind of two-step thing here. So here's the big thing, is we're going to make sure we maintain this view, because this view is good. We don't need all this rendered stuff right now, but let's get back into our 4-part view here. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click, because it's nice to have our windows open. We're going to left click. We're going to go back to, let's set it on shaded. Now we're going to scroll out. Now it's time to use Make 2D and essentially get a nice, essentially group of, you know, we're going to get a nice line drawing of everything we just did. And we're going to see how this all fits together in just a sec. So first what we're going to do is we're going to hold our left cursor down and we're going to drag a box over everything. Still held down. Release. Great. Now we've selected everything. Now it's time for our old friend, the Make 2D tool. So M-A-K-E 2D, and hit enter. And let's see, this is the view we want. Parallel. Looks good. And then we're going to go OK. It's going to chew through that for a second. We see it loading. Great. Now look what it just produced over in the top. It gave us this nice set of line drawings, or a set of lines that is reflecting what we just sort of looked at in our parallel view. So now here's what we're going to do with this. Let's use the move key, M for move, and then let's just slide this over a little bit just so it's kind of out of the way. Now what we're going to do is, with all these nice lines that we've created, we're going to select them all, left click, hold and drag. All of them selected, release. Then we're going to type export, E-X-P-O-R-T. Great. We're going to scroll up to export. We're going to left click. We're going to go to our same place we were at before, sample files for Illustrator. That looks good. Now we're going to scroll down, and here's a really important step too. We'll call this sample CAD lines. Easy. And we're going to, when it says save as type, a real important step here, we're going to do a drop down and we're going to roll down to DWG, .dwg. That's the one we want. Great. And we're going to hit save. Export scheme, default. Yeah, all this looks good to me. So let's go OK. Now let's see what we have. So we're going to go to sample files for, oh, here we are. Great. So now here's what we have. We have one, our rendered isometric that we looked at before, and two, our sample CAD lines. Now let's see what Rhino just produced into a drawing file for us. I apologize if I'm going a little slower in this one. I just know that this one's a little bit more complicated, so not complicated, but I mean there are a couple steps to it, so I just want to make sure I go through everything thoroughly. I apologize for those of you if this is a little slow paced. Now, as we open everything up, let's see what Rhino has produced to a set of CAD lines for us. As we know, anything that's in a CAD file here like this is great because, oh, there we go. Anything that's in a CAD file like this is really great because now all this can be imported as lines into Illustrator like you might have done in Project 1. But, as you might remember, there's something that we need to do first. See our layouts down here for our page files? These are going to be important for us. I'll show you why here. We're going to go down to Layout 1, select it. Oh, we can just hit Close. Oh, see, look, okay, it's a little ahead of me, but we'll still go through the steps here. We're going to right-click Layout 1. Let's go to Rename, because we want something that's really recognizable. Left-click Rename. We'll call this Illustrator Layout. Great. Now, I know it jumped ahead a little bit on me, but let's just say by some weird happenstance when we created this page, there was nothing in it. Not a problem. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a viewport that has that good line information that we just imported from Rhino in it. So we're going to type VP for viewport. We're going to hit enter. Viewports, rather. My apologies. Viewports, VPorts. Then we're going to hit OK. Then it's going to just let us draw one. Now, as you can see, it automatically snapped. Now, I'm just going to show you that again because I feel like I didn't explain that very well the first time. So again, we're going to type VPorts, VPORTS, hit enter. It's going to ask activate. You can select this one, active model configuration. View change to current. All these settings look good. We're going to hit OK. Then it's going to let us draw from wherever we want to start. So left click, you don't have to hold it down though. AutoCAD's a different beast. You can just click it once and it knows it wants you to draw a box, and then you're just gonna have to click it again to kind of terminate it wherever you want. Now this is great because this is all the information that we wanted from Rhino essentially. So here's what we're gonna do. I don't want to teach you bad habits, but in this case, the scale doesn't really matter quite as much. That is something that we can kind of play around with a little bit once we're in Illustrator. And here's essentially, since this one is so much more of sort of like page layouts and kind of creating something that's more of a nice physical form, this for now, this will work in terms of what we can import in. So we can proceed. Let's select this viewport. See, grab the edge, grab the border, left click once, and we're going to lock this. So we're going to go down here. You see this little lock, this little kind of combination lock. We're going to left click him. Great. Now that's locked. That's not going anywhere. So that's good. That's what we want. Now, this is where I like to do it this way. Illustrator might have updated a little bit, but I want to teach you something that I know for sure will import successfully every time. So here's what I'm going to suggest. We're going to go up to the A, which is going to essentially provide some different options for saving. So go up to the A for AutoCAD. Left click. When you go down to Save As and go up to Drawing, left click again. Here's what we're going to save it as. Sample CAD lines, that's a fine title, but we're going to we're going to go to for files of type. We're going to left click, drop down to 2010. And I know this is for sure because 2010 Rhino files, for whatever reason, or 2010 AutoCAD files, for whatever reason, always import into Illustrator very successfully. So that's what we're going to select because I want this to work for you guys. Left click, and this time we can call it, we'll change the title so we can tell the difference. Sample CAD lines underscore 2010. Sure. Looks good. So now let's hit save. Beautiful. Okay. Time to look back at time to look to something completely new now. Not completely new, but new for these lectures. Let's take a look into Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator right here. You guys will have access in one form or another. Left click. It'll take a moment to load. And essentially this is where we're going to put these two things, there are sample CAD lines from 2010 and our rendered isometrics together to sort of create a little bit of a working end product. So let's go create new. Let's pick a reasonable sheet size. I know that your final sheet size is supposed to be 24 by 36, but since this is just for one view, we don't have to worry too much about that. We just want to make sure we build ourselves a nice big artboard. So let's just call this 11 by 17. That's plenty big. Never hurts to have a little extra space. Go ahead, hit create. Okay, great. My apologies for all these extra tabs I have open. I'm a little bit of a messy Illustrator user. So here we go. Let's move over back to where we had all of our sample files. And here's what we're going to do first. We're going to grab our rendered isometric. Remember that rendering we created, that JPEG? We're going to drag into this new page we just created. Great. So there it is. Now that's pretty good. That's what we like to see. That's our render. So because layering is going to be kind of important for this one, here's what I'm going to suggest. You go to your layer that you just dropped it onto. I'm going to double click it. Yeah, double left clicking the layer lets you rename it. We'll call this render JPEG layer. That sounds good to me. And we're going to, now this is important for this stage, we're going to make sure we lock it. The lock right here. Look, now I can't move it. I can't do anything with it. That's good. It's locked. Great. Now that that layer is in and locked, we're going to go down to this little plus icon down here on the layers tab for plus for create new layer. Great. And we're going to call this layer Autocad lines layer. Good. Here's what we're going to do with this. We're going to go file. We're going to go open. We're going to go to our spot that we just saved everything. Sample files for Illustrator. Great. Sample CAD lines 2010. This is the one we're going to pick. Left click. We're going to go open. Now here is where there are a couple important steps. In this case, you really want to make sure what you do matches mine. So scale 100, that is okay. We're going to go for units here. We're going to pull inches to millimeters. I'm just going to make sure this works really quickly. And we're going to set this to 1 millimeters scale. Now under layout, we're going to go to this drop down menu. Oh, and great. You remember that Illustrator layout that we created for earlier? That's exactly what we want here. Because now it remembers that was the layout that we're pulling, like the page layout from the Autocad file. That's what we're using here. So great. It already knows that's the one we want. Awesome. Center artwork, that looks good. Now we're going to hit, make sure everything matches this. Your import options match this one. Then we're going to hit OK. Now look at all that. That just brought everything in. Now all of these lines are Adobe Illustrator lines. So that's great. Some of these are extra page lines. We don't really need these. That's just more framing. AutoCAD brings them in too. It's not a problem, but we don't really need them right now. So now this is going to be the bit where it's going to be really handy that we have this fresh new layer to bring stuff into. So over here where we imported stuff, we're going to left click, hold down, drag, grab all this material, and then once it's selected, left click and hold again. So you're kind of manipulating it like that. And you can either go Control C and move over to this page and go Control V. Actually, you know what, that works too. You can go Control C, Control V if you want to, or you can do what I do, even though I don't really have a good reason for doing this. And I grab a point on here and I drag it, and if you drag it over to essentially to the new tab, it knows that you're trying to bring it over. So and then you just release, and there you have it. Now, the other really important part of this too is when you're gonna, because as you can see, these are completely different sizes, right? This one's huge, this one's small. We want these to match each other. We want one to sit over top of the other one. So what we're gonna do is when we're resizing this, we're gonna hold the shift key down when we grab these corners. So with the shift key held down, you grab the corner, left click, you hold it down, you drag, and you're gonna notice, look, even as I waver my cursor around, it's still maintaining the exact proportions. It's not doing anything, janky or weird. It's not skewing anything, which is good. So make sure as you are grabbing either of these corners, you're holding your shift key down so that you get a nice, even, proportioned shift key held. And now let's kind of bring this to match. Okay, so we're getting there. Shift key held down, left click, drag. Whew, a lot of resizing. Now, just so you know, if you want to resize or zoom out a little bit on your Illustrator page, actually here I can select out of this for now. What you do is you still using the scroll wheel. The scroll wheel, if you just use it without holding anything down, just takes you up and down. But if you hold Alt down and the scroll wheel, it takes you in and out. So that's going to be really useful for us too. So let's reselect everything again. Let's finish off sort of sizing our lines here. Whoa. And again, with your shift key held, that's really, really key here. We're just going to make sure we get the proportions that we want. And this part might take a little bit of finessing and a little bit of fine tuning, because as you can see, it's just going to take a couple moments here. Now, I can guarantee they will match up. Certainly don't panic about that. As long as you maintained your angle, it's all going to be fine. It might just take a little bit of nudging to get the exact, lines and locations that we want. But we'll get what we're looking for. It might just take a little, and remember, hold that shift key down, just so you don't end up warping your excellent work you've done so far. Okay, now that's getting pretty close. And again, sorry, I know I'm taking you guys through a bit of a long process, but I just, I want you to know that there is a little nudging and a little finessing to this step, but nothing you guys can't handle. Okay, so now that is looking, pretty clear at this point. You see where the lines are. You get a pretty good sense of, the shadow still. Now, I can show you another thing here. This is why it's good that we keep the rendering on one layer, which we can turn off if we choose to, and the lines on a different layer, which we can also turn off if we choose to, or hide if we choose to. Let's lock this for now that we've got this in a good place. So we'll lock the AutoCAD lines layer. Let's go back to our render layer for a sec. Let's say these shadows are a little hard and a little dark. No problem. Because what we can do, as you may have already discovered, now that it's unlocked, we can select the rendered layer again. Left click, and we can change, we go up here, we can change see this here? The opacity. Let's make that like 80. Let's try that. See how that sits. Not bad. Make it 50 if we want to. Because again, we don't want the shadows to be too dark. At this point, we just want people to be able to look at this and see, there are shadows, there's some shifts in contour, that kind of thing, but nothing too dark, nothing too scary. But from here, if I wanted to, I can now link this as an image in an InDesign file and essentially start building my InDesign page. And again, this is only something you need to worry about layering these two things together for your isometric views. You don't have to worry about this with your obliques. Those are not shadow dependent at all. So this is just for your isometrics. As long as and again, keep your shift key held down when you're sizing things on here. And as long as you maintain the same view, whatever view you pick, just make sure you keep that view. You can scroll in and out, but keep your view consistent, both when you're using the render tool, the ray trace, and when you're doing the make 2D, and everything will match up and be nice and compatible.